Hey, welcome back, Math Gurus. In today's video, we're going to learn about absolute value and opposites. So for our first example, we have a number line that begins with -10 and it increases all the way to +10. So the smallest number is -10 and the largest would be a +10. So let's first talk about opposites. So in elementary, we only did positive numbers, which 0, and so forth. So let's look at the second emoji, which is at +6. Now, the opposite of a positive would be a negative. So the opposite of the second emoji is a -6. So that's just opposite. Now the opposite of -6 is a +6. So those are opposites. Now let's talk about absolute value. We want to see how far this second emoji is to 0. So you just count spaces. There's 6 spaces, so the absolute value of the second emoji is 6. So we typically, if a question is asking us the absolute value, you usually see it displayed like this. And in this case, it would be absolute value of 6 is 6. Now, for the blushing emoji, which is the first one that's at -6, your question would look like this. Oops. Okay, so the distance to 0 here would be 6 too. Okay, if you just remember that absolute value will always be positive, you're not going to have negative distances. All right, let's look at one more. So we have 2 emojis. And so if you notice, the first one is at -4. And so the absolute value of -4 is how far is it to 0, which it's 4 spaces. Okay, the second emoji, if we were asking for the absolute value, would be displayed like this, and the answer would still be 4. Now the opposites of positive is a negative, so the opposite of +4 would be -4, and the opposite of -4 is 4. All right, let's complete a table and practice these problems. So we have our first problem here, and it's in between, let's say halfway between 0 and -2. Well, if you go back to this number line, you notice that we're increasing higher negative numbers, which is just getting smaller. So in this case, halfway between 0 and -2 would actually be -1. So our answer is -1 for the number. The absolute value is how far is this to 0? Okay, and this is why teachers will say it's always positive, because distance is not negative. Would be 1. And what is the opposite of -1? +1. Now for the next one, this one's a little trickier because we're going from -5 to -10, -15. So we'll split it up, and it looks like this would be like -6, -7, -8, -9. So our number is -9. How far is -9 to 0? 9. What would be the opposite of -9? 9. Now the next one, for kicks, I'd pause the video, try to complete the table yourself, and then unpause. All right, for the third one, that would be, since it's halfway between -1 and 2, it would be -1.5. How far is that? 1.5. And then the opposite is 1.5. The last one, it would be, halfway would be 7, and then halfway between 7 and 8 would be 7.5. So our number is 7.5. How far is 7.5 to 0? 7.5. And what would be the opposite of 7.5? Well, the opposite of a positive would be a negative. So it's -7.5. I hope this helped. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.